The 104th running of the Indianapolis 500, the 2020 edition, scored the lowest television ratings in the race's history. It's been live on TV since 1986 and has been shown on TV in some form or another consecutively since 1965. These were the lowest ratings of all time. Now, that being said, any rating above a 0.0 in the time of the beer bug is going to be seen as somewhat of a success. But for a racing series, for a sports league that relies so heavily on one event to fund the rest of the season, particularly for teams who need to sell sponsorship for the next coming race season, an event like the Indianapolis 500 dropping in the ratings to this extent is bad news. Now, just how far did it drop? Well, I'm going to pass it over to our pal Adam Stern of the Sports Business Journal, who reported that NBC got a 2.3 rating, and that equals 3.737 million viewers. Now, here's the bad news from that. That rating is down 1.6 points from last year's event on NBC on Memorial Day weekend, and it's down 1.7 million viewers. Now, that number, those numbers, both the viewership and the ratings, are not only lower than the Daytona 500, though the Indy 500 has been lower than the Daytona 500 since about 1996, but this is perhaps the most concerning report of all of them, is that the Indy 500, for the first time in probably since 2008, I think, has had a lower television rating than the Brickyard 400, which is the NASCAR race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Is it time to hit the panic button? Probably not quite yet. The one thing that, I think a lot of people are going to end up explaining this away as is that this was the first and hopefully only Indianapolis 500 that will take place in the month of August. And there's no doubt about it. That was a contributing factor. This video will explore some of the other reasons, because quite honestly, I don't think you lose 1.7 million viewers just because your date changed. I think there are a lot of other factors that go into that. And that's what we're going to discuss in this video. Essentially, we're going to do an autopsy on this TV rating and look at some of the factors that contributed to the lowest rating in Indy 500 history. And I've just got to say, in retrospect, now looking at the TV rating, I think pretty much anybody would say now, thank God they didn't red flag the race with 5 laps to go to repair that attenuated barrier that would have taken 1.5 hours. That would have killed the TV ratings even worse than they already were, no doubt about it. So what were the contributing factors? What really, what were some of the things that are not just, hey, it's the Corona 500 and it's taking place in August? And I think the first finger I point is at NBC. And NBC has been a great partner for IndyCar, no doubt about it. And what has been such a head scratcher about this whole thing is that the TV ratings pretty much across the board for IndyCar this year have been up. In fact, the Indy 500 qualifying broadcasts were up 20%. And yet, somehow, the Indy 500 managed to lose 1.7 million viewers. How does that happen? Well, I think the very first thing I would point to is the start time of the race. And we pretty much, everybody looked at that when it had been announced that the green flag was going to fall at 2:37 p.m. Versus when it usually takes place, which is noon, 12:30 at the latest. The green flag is out and the race is on. For whatever reason, NBC decided to push the start time of the race back, supposedly chasing those West Coast viewers. That clearly didn't work because, and this is the thing, this is the theory I've always had on the noon start times, is that a Californian who was not going to wake up at 9 a.m. local time to watch the Indy 500 is not going to wake up at noon local time to watch the Indy 500. If they don't care about the Indy 500, they're probably not going to watch it. And if they're a super casual fan and they happen to roll out of bed at noon, they're still going to turn on the race, probably have about 50 laps to go, and that's when the casuals turn on anyway. So from that perspective, I could not understand why they did a late start. But perhaps the worst offense of that late start meant that IndyCar, the Indianapolis 500, and NASCAR, with their race at Dover, were in direct competition on television. And not only direct competition on television, I think it would be understandable if NASCAR was taking place on Fox or ESPN. No. NASCAR and IndyCar are both NBC sports properties. NBC competed against itself with NASCAR and IndyCar. Now, did the races go off exactly at the same time? No. But the NASCAR race started about halfway through the Indianapolis 500, and I guarantee you that hurt the Indy 500 TV rating. And there was really no reason to do it, because ultimately the NBC broadcast went on the air at 1 p.m., and if you really need to do a pre-race show, maybe do that on NBC Sports Network. What really should have been done was that the race broadcast comes on, they sing Back Home Again in Indiana, say, gentlemen, start your engines and roll the cars. I think, and I'm going to talk about this in the next point, I think one of the other major contributing factors to this was the fact that too much time was spent dwelling on what was missing from the race and not what made the race great. That pre-race show was absolutely excruciating to watch. The reason for that, of course, was the fact that there were no fans there. And that is the second point. Now, watching the Indianapolis 500 with no fans in attendance is like watching a Star Wars movie without the John Williams music. Yes, it's the same thing. Yes, it looks the same. Yes, it sounds the same to a certain extent. But there's obviously an important element missing, and that's what the Indy 500 this year was all about. And I don't believe that anybody involved with the TV broadcast did a very good job, at least in the pre-race, which for casual people, that pageantry, that pomp and circumstance is such an important part of the Indianapolis 500. It's what differentiates it from every other race. The fact that the pomp and circumstance was so hollow and strange and weird and a reminder of all the things that people would want to watch the Indianapolis 500 to escape from. I mean, again, I'm one of the biggest fans, out there. And I could barely keep my eyes on the pre-race. It was extremely depressing to watch. It was tough to watch. Once the race got going, it was totally fine because you can forget about some of the troubles in the world. But the fact that they had to tack on an hour and a half pre-race where you're just constantly reminded of what's missing from the Indy 500, I don't think it was good television. Like I said, they should have gone off at 1 p.m. But here is the major issue. And there are some numbers from the TV ratings that we got, which are fascinating to me. And I think probably hasn't been talked about enough. So we're going to talk about it here. The Indianapolis area was down 8.7 points in the TV ratings. The Indianapolis area, which, of course, no one from Indy or anywhere else could attend the race, so this is a captive audience, essentially. It was down 8.7 points from the 2016 race, which was also not a TV blackout race, the only other one. There have only been two in history, 2020 and 2016. Down 8.7 points in the TV ratings from 2016, which was a sellout race where there was 300,000 people in attendance, 350,000 people in attendance at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and the TV ratings were still higher in 2016 without all those people watching on television who were at the racetrack. So what does that say? Well, it says a lot of things. The first thing I think is that there were a lot more sour grapes than I think the media maybe paid attention to. And I'll include myself in that. I probably didn't think of the fans quite as much as other people, or certainly the fans did. I think a lot of fans had a lot of hard feelings about what has gone down. Because quite honestly, think about it, and I mean, we all were in the same boat here. Pretty much everybody got dragged around, pretty much since whenever they delayed the race, which was April? Maybe right at the beginning of May. They delayed the race, and everybody kind of got yanked down the road. And thinking that, okay, the race is happening. It sounds like it's going to happen with 100% capacity. Then it went to 50, then it went to 25%, then it went to nothing right before practice opened. And I think a lot of people just got tired of it. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, speaking from my own personal experience, again, it wasn't just that the race got, canceled with fans that kind of broke me. I mean, there was a lot of other things that were happening in my life, no doubt about it. But I think a lot of people are going through that. And I think a lot of people just kind of threw up their hands when that announcement was made and said, look, I can't be invested in this thing this year. And I think ultimately that was a big contributing factor. I think a lot of people, I don't want to call it a boycott because I don't think that's what it is, but I think a lot of people just were disinterested in the race this year for that very reason. And unfortunately, one of the major contributing factors to some of that disinterest was the fact that Roger Penske himself, in his first year of track ownership, guaranteed the fans that the race would run with them in attendance or not at all. That's a major mistake from Roger Penske. Major, major mistake. And it's going to take him a couple of years to hopefully undo the damage that caused. And some people may say that's a hyperbolic thing of me to say, but I would say look at historical precedent, especially with fans at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. When they get burned, oftentimes they don't come back for a while. 1996, the split, IndyCar, ultimately the crowds did dwindle. They came back once the series reemerged, but it took a while. Formula One Grand Prix, after the tire issue with Michelin, and even before that with a staged finish with Ferrari, Rubens Barrichello and Michael Schumacher, fans didn't come back. NASCAR, same way, with the 2008 Brickyard 400. So I think this could be. This could be. We'll have to see. We'll have to see into the future whenever fans are allowed back at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. But I think a lot of people are feeling burned, and I think a lot of people just didn't watch this year because of that. And I mean, again, the TV ratings in Indianapolis reflect that. And if you ever wanted an argument against the blackout, this is it, because the TV ratings still went down. Or the TV ratings were just fine the year that everybody was allowed to go and the year that no one's allowed to go. And the only way to watch on TV, the ratings went down, I guess makes the most sense. But yeah, the fact that no fans, first of all, it hurt the TV product for the reasons I stated before. It was like a John Williams, composed movie without that soundtrack. It's a totally different experience. And then you add on to the fact that the core spot where the fan base is based got screwed the most. I just think that had a lot to do with it. But there was one more thing that I think had to do with it, and ultimately, pretty much everybody's a victim of circumstance in this part, but the lack of media coverage was a major contributing factor as well. And what do I mean by that? Because certainly there were a lot of hardworking journalists and media members who were in attendance and doing work to the best of their ability at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. There's no doubt about it. I'm not going to try to say that, the work that people were doing there was not very good. But unfortunately, or the way the Indianapolis 500 has usually worked in the past has been that there are, hundreds of different outlets there making all sorts of different content for different markets. And ultimately, and I know this because I got a rejection letter based on the fact that they couldn't accommodate me or my outlet. Eventually, things got whittled down, and they had to make some cuts. And ultimately, there were segments of the population who consume media that just never saw anything about the Indianapolis 500. And, it's a shame because, again, there was a lot of good work that came out of the media that was in attendance at the Indianapolis 500, and even people who weren't at the Indianapolis 500, did the best that they could. It's just, I'll give you a great example of this. When I make my starting grid video, which I'm always so proud of every year, and I try to make it better each year. Usually, because I get to go to the racetrack, I get to do my own research. I get to document each livery change as it comes along, and then by the time I get the starting grid video out, each car, to the best of my ability, has the most accurate, up-to-date livery on it, so that everyone who watches that video knows exactly what each car looks like. This year, you think, okay, that's not too bad. Even though I can't do my own research, certainly other people will be posting photos of the cars. Well, Felix Rosenqvist had a major livery change to his car where they changed the halo on the car from white or from black to white. Now you would think, okay, well, I've seen that on the TV broadcast and it happened a week before the race. Surely there's a photo of this car with this livery change. And I searched team social media, I searched journalist social media, I searched Google, specifically 2020 Indy 500 Felix Rosenqvist. Absolutely no results of that car, which spent time on track for, in my estimation, at least 3 days. No photos whatsoever. And I just wonder if that small experience, multiplied by hundreds of thousands and millions of people who could have been influenced to watch the Indianapolis 500, did not see or have the opportunity to consume that content, how much of an impact that created. Because again, we live in an era where, memories are microseconds, and even if NBC did this big special in the month of May promoting the Indianapolis 500, we've lived 3 months of our lives, 4 months of our lives between then and now. They needed more of an internet presence, no doubt about it, because again, when I was Googling things that I'm just looking up, stuff that should be basic information on the 2020 Indianapolis 500, every Google result was only stuff about last year's race. I think the amount of media that came out of this year's Indianapolis 500 was just down. I think there's several contributing factors. Like I said, I think the people who were actually there, unfortunately, they could only do as much as they were allowed to do. They had a lot more access than they've had in the past during this year, but I still don't think they had sufficient access to do the kind of work that they're all capable of. And at the same time, you had a lot of people who were not there for whatever reason. And I think some people, I know I did for the first week, just kind of sat it out. I think there was a lot of disappointment. I think there were some hard feelings out there for sure. I think there was just less content being produced, and that was driving the algorithms less, and there was just less being searched about the Indy 500 this year, less info being consumed, less stories being produced and read and shared. And, the machine just did not get going this year. There just wasn't that enthusiasm. There wasn't that excitement for this year's Indy 500. I mean, it's all these factors coming together and leading to the worst TV rating the race has ever had in its 104-year history. So, I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think I'm way off base? Do you think that I am spot on the money? Is there any other contributing factors you think that kind of went into this? I don't know. Let me know down in the comments. It's obviously not great news, but it's something that needed to be talked about. No doubt about it. So thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube. Subscribe for more IndyCar, Indy 500, and motorsports content, and I will see you in the next video.